Well, greetings, everybody, and welcome. Want to thank you for taking the time to watch this. This is a webinar of sorts for Genesis West Covenant Church. Is a financial update. My name's Andrew Lonsbury. I'm one of the elders, and pleased to just give you what I hope is a pretty short, but yet a little bit lower altitude update of our financial picture. So this is pre-recorded. Date today is April 17th that I'm presenting this. And truth be told, had planned to launch this about a month ago in the middle of March. And we all know what happened around then. And as is the whole world, things changed quickly for Genesis too. And so the information we had planned to present was quickly out of date, and so feel now a month into COVID-19 that we have more new information to share. And so this is not a required reading. Hopefully by now you've seen the e-blast that went out with a really high level at a glance of our financials. And this is really designed for those that want to go a layer deeper and get a chance to dive a little further into where we're at, where we've been, and where we're going. If you don't know who I am, I'm on the right. Thought it'd be helpful to put a face to a name. And Tom Nichols is the other elder who's really been over the last several years leading our finances and as the finance chair. Tom will be stepping off the elder team at the end of this fiscal year, and I've accepted the role starting next year as finance chair. But the two of us, at any point, feel free to email us, ask questions. We want to be accessible for conversations around this. A little bit of where we're going on this webinar, a bit of an agenda. We're going to start with taking a look backwards and looking at the last 3 years where we've been, changes that we've made, where that's left us. That'll go right into where we are now. And as I mentioned, talking a little bit about the COVID-19 impact, and then starting to turn ahead towards how we're thinking about FY21, the budget process, and then that will dovetail into where we are going, what you can expect, what's ahead, and answering the question, how can I help? So hope to cover that in our time today. So here what you're looking at is a chart of our income over our expenses. And as you take it all in, there's quite a bit to take in. So just want to make a couple comments on what you're seeing and make sense of this. This is going back to FY18, which would be starting June 2017 is Q1. And you see a little bit of a spike here. So a lot of that's just timing issues in Q1, Q2 of FY18. And really the big spike there that you're seeing in FY18 is our denominational support. That was the last time that we received denominational support. And at that point, we became entirely financially independent. We then shortly after that experienced a pretty significant decrease in income that you can see there on the graph, and a number of reasons for that I'll answer in just a second and talk about why that happened. But really it was Q3 of FY18 that we started to run into a little bit of trouble. Our expenses were significantly above our income on a month-to-month basis. And I'll point out now that this graph is average monthly expenses. So in Q3, we were spending a little over $40,000 a month and taking in a little under $30,000 a month. We did some really hard work, made some really difficult decisions in the process to get our financial house in order. But that we did. And by Q2 of FY19, you can see that red line is now under the blue line, which is what, of course, needed to happen. And since then have been consistently spending less than we've been taking in, which of course is the whole goal. Moving in, this is a chart of our cash balance over that same period of time, and of course directly correlates to the chart we just looked at. But I think this is an important slide to spend some time on, because really for an organization like Genesis, we do not have any debt. We don't own a building, don't have a whole lot of fixed assets. We have said another way, we have a very simple balance sheet. So therefore, looking at our cash balance is really the best indicator of our financial health. And you can see here, again, compared to that last chart, at its peak, we built up a cash balance of close to $100,000. And then in that period of time where we were spending quite a bit more than we were taking in, of course, that meant going through our reserves. And the lowest our operating account, our bank balance ever got, as you can see, is Q1 of FY19. So this would be the summer of 2018, where we got right around $25,000. That was a hard point, and again, a lot of hard decisions made, but since then have been building that cash balance and cash reserves back up over time steadily. And as it sits today, or at least at the close of March financials, we had a little over $70,000 in the bank. So that was a lot of information fairly quickly. And for those that are more bullet point people, just maybe spoke to the visual folks, to distill what you just saw down into some headlines. We did experience a decrease in revenue. Giving and revenues in total have reduced in total from its peak by about $20,000 per month at the start of FY18 compared to now. We're now taking in about $27,000 a month, or I should say prior to the COVID-19, taking in about $27,000 a month. A lot of factors went into that. Probably most notably is the expiration of our denominational support. We also moved locations, we planted a church, and we changed our organizational structure quite a bit. And all of those, hard to say exactly what contributed how much, but all of those, in our view, contributed to the revenue decline. The good news is we've adjusted our budget, we've brought our expenses below our revenue, and now for a year and a half running, we've consistently, again, kept our expenses under our income, and that's what's allowed us to build our cash reserves back from a low of $25,000 at the start of fiscal year 19 to, again, just over $70,000 at present. So that kind of puts us talking then about where we are now, and I'll start by saying going into the COVID-19 crisis that really hit about a month ago, early to mid part of March, heading into that, as I mentioned, taking in about $27,000 each month. That is entirely from tithes and offerings. We are wholly independent from the revenue standpoint, and operating that way. Spending close to what we're taking in, again, a little bit under, but just to give just a really high level breakdown of what our expenses look like. About 2/3 of it goes to Pastor Steve salary, and then to Larissa, a part-time director of operations, and Rebecca, part-time admin assistant. Rent to Elam, utilities, liability insurance, kind of lights on things, everything you would need to just operate. About 2/3 of that 27,000. And then you start to say, okay, after the lights on, what's left? And it's about $9,000 each month, which then you can start to look at all other staff, kids and teens, everything we put on for programs related to missions, to relational ministries, and the worship team, everything else kind of wanted to give some sort of split to show that really staff has done a phenomenal job uh, executing what you see week in and week out, day in and day out on a really minimal budget. I think we can feel really good about how we've optimized, and that's been hard work. Again, we've trimmed and cut expenses quite a bit over the last 18 months, and really think the team deserves a lot of credit um, for still executing with such a high degree of professionalism and everything else on a very limited budget. Since COVID-19 really happened, we've been looking, of course, closely at how that's impacting our finances. And just to report, kind of preliminarily, it did impact March giving, but 10 to 15% decrease, as you can see there. Again, we're taking in about 27,000. March was a bit lower at 23,500. Uh, Preliminarily at April, we noticed right away that we lost some monthly donors. Of course, as Steve has shared in some Sunday morning services, that we were experiencing job loss, we're experiencing changes in income through all this, and so that's certainly understandable. But it has impacted Genesis from that standpoint. At the same time, we've had a handful of folks step up with special one-time gifts, and more than we're maybe normally used to on a given month. That has propped up April giving, and if we had to guess right now, and again it's the middle of the month, we're projecting to land somewhere between 25 and 26,000. So still a little bit of a decrease from where we were, a little bit of an increase from last month in March. But again, losing the monthly donors and gaining some one-time gifts. So looking at that, the elders also wanted to look at the facilities made available by the federal stimulus bill that came out and has been in the news quite a bit, and looking at some early on impact to our giving, and also recognizing that it probably won't get better right away, and there's certainly a threat to the short or even long term, and we just don't know yet. So with that, Genesis is a small business with less than 500 employees. So just like any other small business, we were eligible for some of the offerings through this stimulus bill. And elders talked about this and agreed it would be prudent to apply for the Payroll Protection Program, also referred to as PPP. And so as we went through that exercise, and our bank, Bremer Bank, that helped us through that, we qualified for a loan of $37,000 or thereabouts. This doesn't function like any normal loan that you would take on debt. This is really for unprecedented times, an unprecedented opportunity, in the sense that by keeping our current staff entirely on our payroll, we expect that loan will be mostly, if not entirely, forgiven. Said another way, that $37,000 would become a grant to Genesis, or money that really just helps us continue to operate. So we expect that. There's some things that we'll need to watch and calculate to make sure that we qualify for that to be fully forgiven. And the good news is we learned just a few days ago that we were approved for the full amount. So the elders have authorized staff and Steve to sign off on that loan, which again will become a grant. And we are, as of today, do not have the funds in our account, but have been assured that they are coming and that we've been approved. So that is good news, and we'll likely talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides here. So where does that leave us when we start to think about next year? Well, as you can imagine, it's pretty hard to predict exactly what's going to happen. In fact, it's impossible to do a whole lot of accurate forecasting right now. Therefore, what we're really doing is scenario planning. And so we've constructed an FY21 budget that assumes about $24,000 a month in revenue. So again, from where we've been, this current year that we're in, budgeted around 27,000 per month. March was 23.5. April we expect to be a little bit higher than that. We decided to go a bit conservative and predicate our budget on a $24,000 a month revenue. We've done that for every single month, put it at 24,000 with the exception of December, which we usually have a little bit higher giving. Then we looked and we said, we've trimmed quite a bit over the last 18 months. We did challenge staff and management to see what could be trimmed further without impacting staff, and really pleased that they were able to come back, identify a few more expenses that we could trim, and got it to about $26,000 a month, or annualized it came out to $311,000. So if you look at that, that is a planned deficit of about $17,000 for the entire year. We expect, again, if this all happens according to plan, and it likely won't, but as budgeted, we're budgeting a planned deficit of $17,000 for the year. Now, to put this all together with the payroll protection program, the loan that'll become a grant of $37,000, to put this all together, this March through June, where we are now, and what we're seeing, we're guessing we're going to run a deficit of about $10,000 to $15,000. That's just based on the decrease in giving we've seen. That's based on our best guess that we'll run that deficit of $10,000 to $15,000. Then you add that to a planned deficit of $17,000 next year, and we're right at about $30,000 in total of a deficit that we'll run. Our thought is to then think of the payroll protection program as covering that deficit. Again, that was for $37,000. So we have a little bit of a cushion there from the payroll protection that essentially can think of it as funding that deficit we're experiencing the rest of this fiscal year because of COVID-19, and also expect to run next year as a result of COVID-19. And frankly, that's exactly what those funds were offered for. So we feel good about that. At the same time, we have a few other scenarios too, right? So this is kind of our middle scenario, and this is what we're budgeting for, and this is what we'll present at the annual meeting in May. But we also realize that there's likely a worst case scenario that could be revenues even lower than presented here. And if that's the case, that's really exactly why we've done the good, hard work of building up a cash reserve and getting it to the $71,000 that you saw earlier. Even to the point of, some have asked, why do we need to have 3 months of expenses in the bank? And really nobody could have seen this pandemic coming, but it is exactly for something like this that we wanted to have a healthy reserve. So if in a worst case scenario, if giving goes down even further below that 24,000 a month, we'll be prepared to use that little bit of cushion we had from payroll protection, but also then comfortable going into our reserves in this next year. Now, having said that, it'll be a rolling forecast. We're going to, of course, look at it month to month, quarter to quarter, and adjust as needed. And so, we don't expect to deplete all of our cash reserves. We expect to be reactive as quick as we can to changes in our giving environment. But that is the work that we'll do month in and month out as we keep close tabs. The other scenario, of course, is that the economy comes back, that Genesis continues to grow as it has been, and that we actually do better than the $24,000 a month. We certainly hope that will happen. And in that case, the staff team has identified areas of priority spending. If the revenue increases, we'll invest further in kids and teens and missions, in relational and sacramental ministries. We'll fuel those further if we have the means to do so. So this is really not a time to step back and say, okay, Genesis is in good shape, cash reserves, payroll protection program. That is true, but certainly still need the generosity of our community to step up and continue to give as they're able. And if we do see an overall increase, the staff has plans to use that and deploy that in really meaningful and impactful ways. And I'll also just tease out that all of this is, of course, depending on what we see in our country and in our world economically. But as of now, are planning to really present those strategies for investing further in kids, missions, and relational and sacramental ministries in the fall, and really lay those out to say, here's what we would do if we had the funding for it. And then maybe make a special ask or request for our community to step up and help fund those needs that we have. This here is just one other way to look at kind of those other expenses. Again, when you take out the core expenses of paying for Elam, our building, all of our insurance, all of our lights on, and then for operational and senior pastor staff, this is everything else. It's about $8,000 each month. Again, includes kids and teen staff, includes Kara, our director of ministry, and just spreads out and says of these different ministry areas, this is where that funding is going, that $8,000 that's available. Now here again are just some more bullet points to kind of summarize where we are now and put a cap on this section. We've built up the cash reserves. We're pursuing a safe, fully liquid investment option. Now, interest rates have come down quite a bit in the last month, but while we have cash reserves, plan to get some interest-bearing account that we can put that in. So won't be putting that in the stock market or having that kind of exposure, but money market or potentially down the road could be certificate of deposits, but most likely just a high yielding savings account for that cash balance. We're exploring ways to encourage giving and do that in tax efficient ways. So we've, if you didn't know, we've opened a brokerage account, and so you're now able to give gifts of stock. Again, that kind of all depends on how the market is doing for how tax advantageous that is. But we do have the ability to accept gifts of stock. And as you are hearing or will be hearing, we'll be rolling out a text to give option as well. And continuing to seek out all possible cost savings. So Steve's limited his travel, shopping, health insurance, bookkeeping, kind of looking at every expense and saying, are we being the best stewards we can possibly be right now? And again, just really want to give a lot of credit to Steve and Larissa and the team for the way that they've managed, even before COVID, to do this really efficiently. And we've come a long ways, and really think the team deserves a lot of credit for just how well they've done that. Positives amidst uncertainty. That's maybe the best takeaway from this is there's never a good time to go through a pandemic like this. But in our history as a church, certainly in among the best shape we've been in to weather something like this. I think had this pandemic come a year or two ago, it would have been really, really difficult for us as a church. And it's really, really difficult now. But we've done the important work of getting ourselves into a healthy cash position. We've streamlined our operations to really keep his expenses as low as they can, and we're seeing our attendances steadily increasing. So we've added new members. We're seeing steady growth on Sundays. I was going to say in pews, but I guess I'll say online now. And so we are overall in good shape. And so there are some positives, even though the future is a bit uncertain. So we've proposed a fairly conservative budget for FY21. We're leaving some room for upside. We also have a plan if there is a downside, or if we don't meet our budget expectation. And with that, the staff and the leadership are developing plans to invest more deeply in our kids and teens programs, our missions, and things of that nature in FY21, should we have the means to do so. Want to take a few moments just to call out how decisions are made around finances. We've heard that question, and this is just a really simple chart that makes an attempt to show how financial decisions are made. And starting from right to left, the elders, Tom and I and the other elders, develop the budget in partnership with Steve and Larissa and the staff. And the elders approve that budget in principle, which we did this week, and then present it to the membership for voting and approval at our annual meeting. So the elders' job is to work with the staff and develop the budget. The staff's job is to manage within that budget, and the members' job is to approve the budget. And that's what we'll be asking you to do on May 18th at our annual meeting. And if you're wondering how you can help, although your role as members is to approve the budget, that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to ask questions, or that we're not here to listen, to have conversation about this. And so want to say that Tom and I and the other elders are available for discussion about this. Best way to contact us is, you can do it either through Facebook, but email the elders at genesiscov.org, and make sure that if it's a finance question that Tom or I get right back to you. And then, as I said earlier, really want to encourage and challenge us to give as we are able, emphasizing as we are able, because I know that's different for all of us, especially in this time. But if you're able to increase your gift a little bit right now, I would encourage you to do that. If you're in a good spot and maybe your job hasn't been impacted, but you've received your stimulus check and you're in a position where you can give all or part of that to Genesis, would encourage you to do that. Yes, we are in a good spot overall, but there is uncertainty ahead, and we do need your generosity and your support. So that is certainly something you can do. And again, we are looking closely and will continue to look closely at our finances, and we'll be reacting good or bad to that revenue, or that gifts and tithes line in our budget, and adjusting accordingly. And then the other piece is, if you remember, we will ask you to review the proposed budget. We'll make that available ahead of time. And then will you attend the annual meeting in May and cast your vote for approval? And that is what we have for this webinar, this financial update. Want to thank you again for caring, for taking the time to dive in a little deeper by watching this. Want to thank you for your generosity to Genesis and continuing to give and support this incredible church in Robbinsdale, Minnesota. Thank you for all that you do. And we hope to continue to do things like this, to continue to offer financial transparency, so that our entire church body knows where we stand, how we're doing, and where we're going. So thanks again.